Now, it is just 5 days until voters here in Germany go to the polls in snap elections. The main candidates, including Chancellor Olaf Scholz and his Conservative challenger Friedrich Merz, appeared on TV on Monday night to answer voters' questions. One of the top issues in the campaign has been migration, and another is the country's lagging economy. Now, Germany is facing a third straight year of economic crisis, with most Germans increasingly worried about making ends meet. Blame is falling on politicians ahead of Sunday's elections. So how are ordinary people coping with the downturn? We met two families who told us what they're hoping to see from a new government.
Uwe Schönbach and his son Jan-Peter live in Thuringia in eastern Germany. Uwe is a mechanical engineer, but now he's working on reduced hours because his company no longer has enough orders. He's worried about the economy. He's worried about his job.
I often have visits from customers and suppliers, and when you talk to them, they all say plainly that it's never been this bad. It's going downhill. The automotive industry, the whole mechanical engineering sector is in free fall. Everyone is struggling.
Jan-Peter is still in school. He feels that politicians aren't listening to his generation.
I still remember when we were at home for days because school was out. All the teachers were sick. I wish they would pay more attention to us.
Several hundred kilometres away, Munich is one of the wealthiest places in Germany. The Leopold family lives here. Dirk Leopold works as an engineer. His wife Anna is an accountant. They say they're getting by, but that politicians need to do more to turn things around.
Invest in all possible areas. In the areas where there hasn't been investment in the last 15 years. And that's everything from infrastructure to education to internet, new ideas, new technologies, everything.
What I can't stand hearing anymore, what I would tell a politician, is about cutting red tape. It's always talked about, always brought up as a necessary step, and nothing happens.
The mood before the elections in Germany is gloomy, whether in the west or the east, among young or old, in poor or rich regions. There's broad dissatisfaction with the political system because people are worried about the future.
Arthur Sullivan from DW Business is here to talk about what exactly people are worrying about. Good to see you, Arthur. So let's start with the main economic challenges facing Germany today. Tell us what they are.
Well, in simplest terms, Anya, the biggest problem is that Germany has no growth. So for the last 2 years, the country has not only not had any growth, it has had 2 years of a contraction. So the economy has actually shrunk in that time. So when you don't have any growth, you therefore then don't have any confidence. Now, the main reason why there has been no growth is primarily driven by a collapse in the country's manufacturing base. So you're talking about industries like car making, machine building, these sectors, chemicals, which Germany has really been a world leader in for much of its post-war history, but which are collapsing before its eyes, shedding hundreds of thousands of jobs over the last 5-6 years, and the country's sort of flailing as a result of that. Now, there's lots of reasons why those sectors are flagging, but more than anything else, that big collapse in those key sectors is what is undermining German growth, in fact, leading to that contraction and fundamentally leading to this crisis of confidence at the heart of the German economy.
Right, it has quite a heavy psychological impact as well, doesn't it? I mean, let's look more specifically at companies and medium-sized businesses. So what are the main problems there?
So a lot of these companies and as you said, medium-sized businesses, the Mittelstand as it's known in Germany, Germany developed a reputation over the decades as a world leader in manufacturing and then as an export power, making world-class goods from cars to the smallest type of components for different machines and various other types of products. Now, what has really fundamentally happened is that since the war in Ukraine, there's been this huge energy crisis in Europe and particularly in Germany, where because these companies, which are very energy intensive and often reliant on cheaper gas prices have become so much more expensive. And as well, a lot of these companies have to pay a levy to the German government for emergency gas storage. So they're just crippled with huge gas prices. That's not necessarily the only issue. I mean, the car industry, for example, has faced competition from China, from the electric vehicle market. But fundamentally, these big issues, energy prices, another one, of course, is the high cost of labour in Germany. They've eaten away at the profits, obviously, from the lack of market share, but then these extra costs have further crippled them, and then as a result we're seeing all these job losses in the sector.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, we know that there's an election coming up on Sunday. There's been lots of campaign pledges to spend, to invest more, but there's a major hurdle in the way of that, isn't there, here in Germany?
There is. It's something that some of our viewers, I'm sure, will have heard about. They may not necessarily know the details, but it's called the debt brake. So in 2009, quite a while ago now, Angela Merkel, the then Chancellor, brought in a specific rule which really limited the amount of money that Germany can borrow. So to very quickly sum it up, Germany can only borrow a tiny fraction of its GDP, 0.35% over its GDP, which in the context of Germany is really only a few billion, which is a lot of money, but not much for one of the world's biggest economies. Which means that Germany wants to fund itself exclusively through the money it takes in and not necessarily through any extra borrowing. Now, when you have a country that has a lot of economic problems, like infrastructure, for example, needs major investment, it needs much more investment to become more digitally innovative, also in areas like artificial intelligence, a whole range of areas where the country needs to spend money. It's difficult to do that when your economy is not growing and you won't borrow anything else. And the thing is, the political parties, Anya, they disagree over this debt brake. Some of them say, we need to get rid of it, we need to borrow more. Others, the more fiscally conservative ones, like the CDU, the centre-right, the FDP, who were in the previous government, and in fact, that previous government fell over this very issue, they're much keener to keep it and have that more conservative approach whereby you don't take on extra borrowing.
Just briefly, Arthur, looking ahead to the election, I mean, what kind of impact do you think the election really can have on the economy? I mean, do you think a new government will be able to turn things around?
Well, I think it's important to always be optimistic about the economy because you can definitely talk yourself and think yourself into a worse situation. Optimism and confidence are fundamental factors in driving a business or economy forward. But Anya, the key thing is here, no party, we don't know the results yet, but no party is likely to have a majority. There's going to be a coalition, possibly involving as many as 3 parties. So it could be that centre-right party, the centre-left, the SPD, and possibly a third party like the Greens, who knows? They all have different approaches to these issues. There's going to be horse trading. I think the really interesting thing will be to see the programme for government, whatever programme for government emerges from the election, and see what kind of things they can agree on and what is their common approach to dealing with Germany's multitude of economic problems.
We'll know much more after Sunday. DW Business, Arthur Sullivan. Thank you so much, Arthur.
Let's look at this with Marcel Fratzscher, who is president of the German Institute for Economic Research. He's also a professor at Humboldt University, Berlin. Welcome to DW. Everywhere you look, certainly in the West, they're talking about a cost of living crisis. Germany, obviously suffering the same at the moment. Are there particular reasons why Germany is being hit particularly hard?
The reason why the German economy is doing worse is for 2 reasons. First, its openness to trade and its former dependence on energy imports. Exports are suffering. And second, industry is doing very poorly. And we just saw it in the reports. Industry companies are having a very hard time. The industrial sector is shrinking since 2018, so this is nothing new. So this has happened over the last 5 years and it's getting worse. But at the same time, one also has to be very honest and say, well, many services sectors, people are doing well. And my assessment is the mood is a lot worse than the reality. We have record employment. We never had more people in jobs than today. We have rather a shortage of skilled workers, in particular engineers. The fear is not so much about the present, about the business cycle, about the recession. It's really about the future. And that concern, that fear is justified.
And what do you see from the offerings from the various political parties ahead of Sunday's election? What do you see from them that would change this for the better?
To be quite frank, I see very little by all parties. This has been an election debate which basically has been a struggle or a fight for redistribution. The parties right of center are promising huge tax cuts of partly 3%, 4% of GDP, including the Conservative Party, which is the front runner at the moment, knowing full well that this will not be implemented. And most of that tax cut to the rich, the parties left of the center are promising increases in pension and public pensions, so a redistribution from young to old. So the young generation is really the victim of this campaign because the promises are we don't have to change in Germany. It has worked well in the past. We want to go back to the past. We don't want to go into the future. And that's why I'm not very optimistic about a new government really having understood that reforms have no alternative and they need to be courageous and really changing a lot within the German economy and society.
So what, if not that, if not doing what we did before but better, if not that, then what are you calling for? What would improve Germany's economic prospects?
I'm convinced there are three things the new government needs to do. First, it needs to re-establish confidence, especially the economy is a lot about trust, and that trust is not present. So companies are not investing, consumers are not consuming. And I'm optimistic on that a new government will be less, there will be less infighting, they will have a clearer idea. The second, a major investment initiative, and also that we heard just in the reports. Germany has a pretty bad public infrastructure, is investing far too little in energy infrastructure, digital infrastructure, and education. And the big hurdle is the debt brake. So we Germans love the debt brake. We hate debt. And that's probably the biggest dilemma a new government needs to solve. It needs to spend more, it needs to invest more, and that inevitably will mean more debt. And the third big challenge is Europe. Germany needs to take more responsibility in Europe. We see this with the conflict in the Ukraine. We see it now with the recent developments through the US government, through Donald Trump. So without a strong, united Europe, particular Germany will pay a very high price for this crisis.
Let me just pick out one of the points you raise there in your plan for the country. Investment in infrastructure. This has been a call for the last 10 years at least. Why is it that successive German governments have been so shy of putting money into the country's infrastructure?
There are two reasons for that. First, it's a federalist structure of the country. We have very strong checks and balances. Half of all public investment is conducted at the municipal level. And we have 30% of the municipalities that are over indebted. They cannot invest more. So we need a fundamental reform helping them to invest more. That's one of the reasons. The second one is, look, Germany had a golden decade of the 2010s. The economy was hugely successful. And when my institute 10 years ago, actually 12 years ago, in 2013, said we need more public investment, people attacked us and said that's rubbish. The German economy is doing so great. So why should we change anything? And that understanding we need to change. We need to accept more debt in return to more investment and more productivity and competitiveness. That conviction, broad conviction in public, has not sunk in yet. And that's my concern over the next 4 years.
Thanks for leading us through that. Marcel Fratzscher from the German Institute for Economic Research. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.